Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
we must seek the testimony under oath of January 6th Central Player.
The January 6th Select Committee votes unanimously to subpoena former President Donald Trump.
Part of our core values is loving our neighbor as we would love ourselves. So all of us here are thinking, what would we need?
Families are left to rebuild after losing everything in a building explosion. How the community is stepping up in a live report from Austin.
That is 110% union busting.
Starbucks shuts down one of its unionized Chicago locations, citing safety issues.
How two researchers with Chicago connections have been at the forefront of recovery efforts after major oil spills in Peru and the U.S.
Art intersects with public space in the work of a new MacArthur Fellow from Chicago. We welcome artist and architect Amanda Williams.
The more that we understand other cultures, the less fear that there is.
And an Orland Park Ballet Company has an important lesson on addressing mental health as told through dance.
And Brandis and Paris, as you mentioned, I'm in Austin as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Now, a help center recently opened up following last month's building explosion, erect an affordable housing building that displaced 31 families. We'll hear from community leaders who are stepping in to help. But first, I send it back to you.
Thanks, Joanna. And now to some of today's top stories. The House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol votes unanimously to subpoena former President Donald Trump.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Kinzinger, aye.
Mr. Kinzinger, aye. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
The committee is calling on Trump to testify about his role in the attack. Hearings today also included new footage of congressional leaders during the siege of the Capitol, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. We'll have much more on this later in the program.
A Chicago woman accused of killing and dismembering her landlord inside a Northwest Side home is being held without bail. 36-year-old Sandra Colalau is charged with first-degree murder, concealing a homicidal death, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Prosecutors say she was overheard arguing with 63-year-old Frances Walker over an eviction notice before Walker went missing. They also claim she later attempted to discard bloody rags at a local beach.
Workers at the Field Museum say they want to form a union. The employees say they're working with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Council 31. 63 employees signed a letter citing low wages and high turnover as reasons behind the decision. They become the city's second major unionized museum, joining the Art Institute.
And coming up in the program, we meet one of the recipients of the MacArthur Genius Grant.
But first, following last month's building explosion on Chicago's West Side, where are the displaced residents living today? We're live in Austin right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A building explosion last month left one person dead and several injured. The explosion happened in the Austin community on Chicago's West Side. Reporter Joanna Hernandez and producer Acacia Hernandez spent the day there as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series to learn more about the local relief efforts to help residents displaced by the tragedy. And Joanna joins us now with more. Joanna, is there any update regarding the cause of the explosion?
And Brandis, according to fire officials, the blast had something to do with the ignition of natural gas. What ignited it, that's still under investigation, but I can tell you there's major damage to the building. Just take a look at it. This is what it looks like. We're on Central and West End Avenues. Most of the windows are boarded up at this 4-story building. The roof is completely gone. I spoke with a resident who lives in an apartment complex right next to it. He says the explosion felt like an earthquake.
It was scary. All that up there was gone. Some of them had no clothes on. It was scary. And the guy that blew out the window, I looked out the window, and he was telling us to throw a mattress down. I come out the back, His face, he blew from the front all the way to the back. His face was burnt all the way down. All his skin was out of his face. Could you imagine seeing something like that? I'll be in the house sometime at night. Seems like I can still hear that out there.
The tenant also tells us his building currently has no gas. Now, this is video of what the scene was like the day of the explosion. This happened on September 20th around 9 in the morning. We know a 29-year-old man suffered extensive burns and was pronounced dead days later. He was one of several that were injured in the blast. Now, down the block, the Red Cross set up inside Circle Urban Ministries for the first 3 days to assist families. The CEO of the organization says his team has been working with families to get them what they need.
There was 31 families in the building, 30 of them made it out safely, and that is a blessing. The tough thing was our shelter was open 3 days. Many people had not found new apartments by then. So on the second and the third day, that was our only focus.
The building is owned by West End LLC and managed by Urban Alternatives. Over the phone, I spoke with a spokesperson for West End LLC, and he shares the owner was on scene, making sure tenants were okay. We're told they waived past due balances and refunded last month's rent, as well as working with some tenants to find them housing. We met with Leotis Thomas, who is the vice president of the Greater Austin Development Association. He manages buildings in the neighborhood. He says the owner is known in the community and runs multiple affordable housing units.
He did an inspection the week before to make sure everything was looking right. And from what the city saw and from what he saw, everything was in order. And so on top of that, he also refunded all of the rent checks. He didn't have to do that. As an operator, you know, he feels he is a part of the community, so he's doing all that he can to make sure that everybody's stable.
At the Austin Town Hall Park, a temporary loan outreach center has opened. The U.S. Small Business Administration approved a disaster declaration last week. Displaced residents can come in to learn more about filing for low-interest loans to help replace damaged or destroyed property. An associate tells us the loans offer families longer terms to pay it back with a 5-month deferment period.
We offer up to $40,000 for the personal property and for up to $200,000 for repair replacement of the real estate. About 10 to 12 families have come in and applied. Right now, they're not interested in taking on any additional debt with the loans, but we did have a couple different applicants that did apply that were interested in the low interest loans.
And that center will be open until October 20th. And today, the Circle Urban Ministries is holding a resource fair where those who were affected by the explosion can come in and get anything from clothes to free gift cards.
Our neighbors are experiencing trauma there, but they're also experiencing, you're now in a new place, but you don't have anything in this new place. So we're trying to help supply furniture. We're trying to help supply toiletries, pots and pans, and things like that. Our board of directors and our donors have been phenomenal in sending in things that they feel like they would need in this situation.
And as you heard, families lost everything and they have no choice but to start over. But the community and local organizations are coming together to help them with housing and other things they'll need to move forward. And coming up, we'll speak with the local alderman. But first, I send it back to you.
Joanna, thanks. We'll see you shortly. And now to Paris and a dramatic day in Washington. Paris.
That's right, Brandis. Former President Donald Trump gets a summons to appear before the House January 6th Select Committee. That move caps off a hearing featuring new behind-the-scenes video recorded during the siege and further evidence that seeks to make the case Trump knew he lost the election while pushing various schemes to overturn it. And joining us are Patrick Cotter, a former federal prosecutor who is now in private practice at Greensfelder, Hemke & Gale, and Renato Mariotti, a former federal prosecutor, legal commentator, and trial lawyer with Bryan Cave, Leighton Peisner. Thank you both for being here. Patrick Cotter, because of the nature of this committee, it dissolves in the new year. Can Trump simply play out the clock or run out the clock before ever having to testify?
Yes. Yes, I mean, that's a simple answer. He has a track record of running out clocks and appealing and objecting and filing motions and delaying. He only has to last for 3 more months. Yes, he'll be able to run out the clock, and he will never testify before this committee.
Renato Mariotti, given that, is this largely symbolic, this 9-0 vote to summons him before the committee?
I think that's likely going to be the case. It definitely sends a message that there's more to hear from Trump, but unless the Democrats retain the House of Representatives, I don't expect any enforcement past the new Congress taking over in January.
Patrick Cotter, Vice Chair Liz Cheney also said that they're ready to make criminal referrals to the DOJ. Of whom and for what?
Well, she didn't say, but at the end of her statement, she read off a list of about 8 names in addition to Mr. Trump. And if any of those people don't already have a criminal defense lawyer, they should get one. So I think they will make a referral to DOJ. That's unnecessary. DOJ doesn't need a referral, but they will make the referral. I think they will recommend that they be charged at least with conspiracy and with obstruction of Congress. It'll be interesting to see if they recommend that they also be charged with participation in sedition, which is what the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boy defendants in Washington on trial right now are facing.
And some of those names that Liz Cheney read off, Michael Flynn, Roger Stone, et al.
Mr. Bannon, Mr. Navarro. These are all people who have either taken the Fifth or otherwise made themselves unavailable to the committee. And they are also people that the evidence the committee has shown to the public were all involved, apparently, or there is evidence to suggest that they were all involved in both planning to try and steal the election and, to a great extent, the January 6th riot.
And committee member Jamie Raskin today read off the insurrection statute. Let's take a look.
Section 3 of the 14th Amendment disqualified from holding federal and state office anyone who has sworn an oath to defend the Constitution but betrays it by engaging in insurrection or rebellion. It was President Lincoln at the start of the Civil War in 1861 who best explained why democracy rejects insurrection. Insurrection, he said, is a war upon the first principle of popular government, the rights of the people.
Renato, it's very clear that the committee believes this very severe charge should be brought. Do you think the DOJ would bring an insurrection charge against either former President Trump or some of his high-level accomplices?
I think, if the evidence was there, they might. I think the problem is that the committee has not yet obtained that evidence. It did not appear to me that there was sufficient evidence to charge the former president or any of his top aides with insurrection. There is a potential incitement charge, an incitement to violence, that could be brought. And also, certainly, there are ongoing investigations of the fake elector scheme and of some of the advice that was given to the former president that really involves false statements being made in the course of a federal investigation by Mr. Clark and Eastman. So I think some of that's more likely to be where charges are filed in this case rather than something like insurrection or seditious conspiracy relating to the former president and his closest aides.
Renato, what's the evidence that's missing here? Just some kind of direct link to the former president and a plan to violently overthrow the elected government?
I mean, there's no question that there were people who were trying to violently overthrow the government and interfere with the government. Those people were storming the Capitol and attacking folks. A lot of those people have been charged with seditious conspiracy. Some of them have pled guilty. There's an ongoing trial now. I think the question is, for all those people names that Patrick just referred to, was there evidence that they were coordinating, directing, working with those people as part of a coordinated conspiracy? A lot of the evidence just isn't quite there. I think there's further investigation that's warranted. Obviously, they took the Fifth. There may be investigative activity we are unaware of, but based solely upon what we saw publicly, I just don't think there's enough there to show beyond a reasonable doubt an agreement with those people.
Today and throughout this process, the committee has sought to show evidence that President Trump knew he lost the election and still went forward with these schemes to overturn the results. Is that the kind of evidence that is necessary to bring any kind of charges against him, showing some kind of intent?
Yes. They have to show that the president was not mistaken or naively believed that, in fact, he had one. So there was a lot of evidence that was summed up today, and a little bit of new evidence, all designed to show that the president knew he was lying. He knew that these claims he was making were false, and he had the mens rea, the legal intent necessary to commit the crime of obstructing Congress, to commit the crime of conspiracy with others to obstruct Congress. And I respectfully suggest that, Renato, maybe I was a more aggressive prosecutor in my day, but I think I might be able to make a case that a guy who tells the crowd to go attack the building, and then they go attack the building, and he knows they're armed because the Secret Service told him that morning they were armed. I think I might be able to get an indictment for sedition. I really do. You send armed people to attack Congress to overturn an election, and I think there's at least a basis to at least get the indictment. And you get a few witnesses to cooperate along the way. That's how federal prosecutors do it. You might be able to make that case.
Well, you're on the other side of the coin now, so,
right.
So you're not. Renata, did you want to respond to that?
I do. I mean, I think, as I mentioned, I think incitement, which is what I think Patrick's referring to, something I do think is there. I think there's sufficient evidence to charge incitement to, let's say, riot or something along those lines. I agree with that. I think there are, clear First Amendment issues there that may cause the Justice Department to not bring that case, particularly since they, frankly, have stronger potential criminal charges in the Mar-a-Lago documents case, to just name one example. So I'm not sure they'll go there, but I think that is the more likely route rather than seditious conspiracy. In a way that's been charged by the Justice Department really requires this pretty actually significant elements there that they would have to prove that I just don't think are here.
Well, there's a lot of decisions clear that prosecutors and the DOJ are going to have to make. Let's take a look at some of the other video that was put on display today for the first time, featuring House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and others in a hidden place.
We're trying to figure out how we can get this job done today. We talked to Mitch about it earlier. He's not in the room right now, but he was with us earlier and said, we want to expedite this. And hopefully they can...
Part of this, Patrick Cotter, is the response. So they showed text messages today among the Secret Service. They clearly knew the gravity of what might happen, that there might be violence, might be even murder. Does this present more questions about why agencies hadn't coordinated a swifter response?
I think it does. I think that was one of the most stunning pieces of evidence we heard today. The degree to which the Secret Service knew that there was violence, there was automatic weapons, there was more than one weapon, there were lots of weapons, to the degree they knew that, and yet there was no evidence that we're aware of yet of them notifying the Capitol Police, of them notifying the police in D.C., of them notifying the Department of Defense to get the National Guard there. They knew a lot about the kind of violent, armed people that were coming to this rally and march. And it was stunning today to learn the degree to which that was the case. And I think it raises a lot of questions that the Secret Service is going to have to answer.
Still a lot of dots to connect there with those all those millions of Secret Service text messages that are entered into evidence, we think. Renato Mariotti, there's also the Mar-a-Lago documents case where the president faces potential major legal exposure. If you are the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, does that play into your thinking about potentially bringing charges in this case?
100%. Because when you're a prosecutor, you just need a conviction on one felony count, and then the judge is required under the law to consider all of the conduct, all of the characteristics of the defendant. And so I think that the strongest potential criminal case that's out there is the documents case. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, the former president kept top secret government documents, and even after there's a grand jury subpoena, he still retained them. There were false statements that were made, and there's new evidence that he asked individuals to move documents after there's a grand jury subpoena. So that seems really, really strong to me and very straightforward, much easier to prove than a case around this conduct. And I think the safer and more typical route for the Justice Department would be go for the easier charge to prove, and then put all that evidence in there at sentence.
And there's still reports out there that investigators might believe that they haven't retrieved all the documents that there are to retrieve. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being here. Our thanks to Patrick Cotter and Renato Mariotti. And now, Brandis, we go back to you with a local genius.
In Paris, the MacArthur Foundation announced its annual list of fellows, honoring creative individuals with a no-strings-attached grant. It's often called the Genius Grant. 3 Chicagoans made the list, including sociologist Reuben Jonathan Miller and composer Tamika Reed. They're both out of town, and we'll catch up with them later. But joining us now, we're very excited to welcome the artist, architect, and now MacArthur Fellow Amanda Williams. Welcome to Chicago Tonight, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, congrats, obviously. When and how did you receive the news?
So I got the news a little over a month ago. I actually was at my alma mater, Cornell University. I'd just given a lecture. I was dragging my youngest daughter around campus, reminiscing, and I was literally standing at my dormitory explaining to her that when I walked through those doors, my life changed. And then the phone rang. And it was the foundation calling. I said, do you have somewhere you can take a moment to yourself? You know, so when you get that kind of call, you're panicked, you know. And so when she said, we're calling from the MacArthur Foundation, you know, it's, no, you're not. You know, the cry, the tears start. And then it was just a blur, like whatever they were saying. You're just not listening anymore.
Of course. Like, you're going to have to repeat all of this again
Yes.
to me later on when I can actually pay attention. And, of course, you don't know the phone call is coming because no one does.
No.
How would you describe your work, your art?
I think my work uses color as its kind of framework to both draw viewers or participants in, but also to talk about very difficult subjects in a very accessible way. So, of course, in Chicago, race and color are intertwined. So there's a way in which I'm able to use color to get people to understand something as complex as redlining, because red is an understandable color, or ultra sheen, or pink oil moisturizer. So I've developed this kind of process of using color to describe complex kind of spatial situations. My training's in architecture, so it really helps bridge this gap between what people might think of as art in a two-dimensional sense. I make paintings and drawings and so forth, but then the built environment as a canvas as well.
And we're looking at some images of your art right now because we were doing a story last week at the Smart Museum of Art at University of Chicago. We shot some video of a project of yours that got a lot of attention. This is Colored Theory. Tell us about that. And you just named some of those colors that you created.
So color theory is a kind of Western convention. It's something you learn in art school and architecture school. And I was joking with a friend that I was an expert in colored theory. And so what might that mean and look like? And so I really thought about colors that impacted my life when I was coming of age on the South Side. And what would that palette be for people that were like me? And so I developed this palette of 8, and then I decided I was going to test it out on the largest canvas possible, which would be these abandoned houses. And then it really did become a project that helped highlight some of the injustices that created that environment. But really the colors were the inspiration for me as an artist, as a painter, as an architect. So there was this kind of perfect, you know, storm of ways to bring together all of those interests and skill sets.
And of course the colors are named for some very memorable colors in the black community. The ultra sheen, the blue, ultra sheen blue moisturizer, and of course
Harold's Chicken Shack.
Harold's Chicken Shack, of course, everybody, a Chicago favorite.
So it was important to have colors that would be both sort of like mnemonic devices and bring people joy or happiness, but also point to an idea of value. So how could these houses get to this condition? And what does it mean to shroud them in things that we actually think are priceless? And so color can do that in a way that messaging can't, that rallying can't, but it can lead to those types of changes. So it was really important to me to frame it actually very much about my own experience and not try to be universal or explain everyone's experience. The West Side would have a completely different palette even.
Of course. Do you feel your work is mostly about Chicago, or could some of these explorations pertain to any big city?
I think on purpose that work was very much about Chicago. It was very much about me having an internal dialogue about wanting to become an architect to change this landscape and then feeling frustrated about that. So I wanted to do things that were hyper-specific. But I think I've been able to now bridge the idea of color beyond that. I have another project called What Black Is This You Say that came during the pandemic, and it really questioned or challenged whose black lives were mattering. You know, there was this panic to make everything okay. So there's a mainstream sort of acceptance of Black Lives Matter, which had, you know, been maligned maybe a year or two before. And so it's like, well, which black lives? The ones that back into parking spaces at Mariano's, or the ones that know which fork you eat shrimp with? Black people are very diverse in and of themselves. And so what does it mean to try to make a monolithic sort of blanket acceptance?
And we also have some video of a collaboration that you did with artist Shawnee Crow at a gallery a couple of years ago. Tell us what this fellowship means for you and your artistic practice.
I think it just says keep going. I think it says continue to take risk and to dream big. Shawnee and I did that project with Andres L. Hernandez, who also was an architecture and Cornell grad. And that was for the Venice Biennale. Originally, it came back to Chicago and really wanted to think about these spaces of joy and spaces of protection for Black women. And so I think thinking always beyond, thinking a little bit further than one might assume either art can inspire or a topic that might not seem like it would be universal but actually should be or is. This weekend I'm planting 100,000 tulips in vacant lots on the south side at 53rd and Prairie. And so it's just right on time. It's an exciting kind of extension for somebody that might have just won a Genius Grant to say, what does it look like to recreate the footprint of the houses that would have existed there had it not been for redlining? So we're planting these red tulips to redefine redlining. And we need as many hands as possible. So most of the work is collaborative, participatory. It's a way that people can see that art can be a catalyst for change.
You trained as an architect and have made the transition, obviously, to art full time. How does your background in architecture inform your art?
I think I got into architecture because I thought that was a vehicle for transforming space or bringing autonomy to space. A lot of what I saw was inequity. At 7 years old, I didn't have the language for that. But I knew when I crossed the Dan Ryan, it was very different. When I crossed Madison, it was very different. And so I think the idea that you can literally change space or be a space shaper is the ultimate definition of architecture. And art allows that in a way that's extremely versatile. Buildings out of necessity need to stand up. They need to operate a certain sort of way. So I appreciate and respect my training and my peers that are architects, capital A. But I also understand that to really create the spaces that we aspire to, you have to have participation and community buy-in. And oftentimes that comes from behavior and spatial practices and not from the building itself.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. Amanda Williams, congrats again. Thank you so much for joining us. I know the last day or so has been a bit of a blur.
Yes.
Good luck to you.
All right, thank you so much for having me.
Up next, a Starbucks location where workers recently unionized is closing its doors. We have the story right after this.
How do we find resources we had no idea about?
The community seems to want us to be in this space.
There's plenty of potential to do that stuff and keep it within the neighborhood and keep it ours.
Starbucks is shutting down one of its first Chicago locations where workers unionized just days before the company was set to begin negotiations on a contract. The Edgewater coffee shop, located steps from the Bryn Mawr Red Line station, is set to close at the end of this month. As Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, organizers and their supporters say the shutdown is a tactic to weaken the union.
Starbucks says the location at Bryn Mawr and Winthrop is closing down because of ongoing safety issues it couldn't solve. Employee and union supporter Carlos Toral says the store does have problems with safety, including incidents of harassment or even assault on a regular basis.
At the same time, it also is they're closing our union. They're ending this store's unionization, and that is 110% union busting. So it's just a really tricky situation, and the timing of it all is also pretty sketch and quite on the nose.
On the nose because workers say the closure was announced just days after they got a date on the books for their first bargaining session with the company, scheduled for later this month. Around the country, Starbucks has temporarily or permanently closed locations that unionized or that organizers say were interested, including in Buffalo, Kansas City, Seattle, and now in Chicago. In response, workers and their allies organized a so-called sip-in Thursday, asking members of the community to show their support by coming to the cafe and ordering drinks under the name Union Strong.
This is what the CEO wants to see, that there's a downside of joining a union, and we need to stand with the workers so that they can stay brave and not lose their livelihoods.
Starbucks has faced a raft of complaints from workers and the National Labor Relations Board over alleged retaliation against pro-union workers and locations, which the company has consistently denied. In a statement on the Edgewater location's shutdown, a spokesperson told WTTW News, "We continue to equip our partners with the training, policies, and information they need to address the societal challenges that cross our store thresholds every day. But when these efforts aren't enough to ensure our partners' safety, we will make the decision to close a store regardless of its revenue or union status." Because this location is unionized, workers can bargain with the company over the effects of the shutdown.
I really hope that the best interests of the partners are the main focus, because this store closure, it's still affecting all of my life, my bills, my day-to-day life.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
The union representing Starbucks workers says it plans to amend an existing unfair labor practice charge against the company over its closure of pro-union stores to include the Edgewater location. And now, Brandis, back to you.
Paris, thank you. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, rebuilding and budgeting in Chicago's Austin community after a deadly explosion. We're one-on-one with a local alderman. Two researchers with Chicago ties talk about their conservation work while helping clean oil spills in Peru and the U.S. And celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month with the help of Orland Park's Ballet 5-8. But first, some more of today's top stories. Millions of older Americans who receive Social Security will get an 8.7% increase in their benefits starting next year. That cost of living adjustment is the largest in more than 40 years. The Social Security Administration says the average recipient will receive more than $140 extra a month beginning in January. This will affect more than 65 million Americans who are Social Security beneficiaries. A program aimed at ending the cycle of recidivism is celebrating the largest graduation in its 5-year history.
All we needed was a fighting chance, and you guys gave us that.
To see, like, you got a solid foundation and you got people rocking your corner even when stuff want to go wrong. You got people telling you, nah, man, it's going to be all right. Like, that means a whole lot.
The North Lawndale Restorative Justice Community Court held a ceremony for 80 graduates today. The program aims to give young adults who have been charged with nonviolent felonies or misdemeanor crimes a second chance. The court is the first restorative justice court in Cook County and started in 2017. People who complete the program have an opportunity to have their charges dismissed and arrest and court records expunged. The parent companies of grocery stores Mariano's and Jewel Osco are in talks about a potential merger. Crane Chicago Business reports a decision between Kroger, which owns Mariano's, and Albertsons, the owner of Jewel, could be reached as early as this week. The parent companies own nearly 5,000 stores combined across the country. A merger deal between the two rivals would create a national grocery giant. And now to Joanna Hernandez, who spent the day in Austin as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
And Brandis, we're now here with Alderman Chris Taliaferro from the 29th Ward. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, I want to start off. You were just at the resource fair organized to help those families displaced from the building right behind you. Can you tell us what it was like inside?
It was a very humbling experience, especially knowing that the residents that were there had lost a whole lot of their personal possessions, and many of them knew, the gentleman that passed away. So it was a very humbling, time today. But at the same time, it did give us and give me a sense of community and how the community has come out for the residents of the property behind us.
Alderman, what were some of those things that you were hearing from families?
Well, many of them are still in need of resources, whether they be financial resources and even down to the basics of clothing and furniture. So there's still a major need with all of the families that were there today.
And it seems the community and organizations are really coming together to help.
They have come together tremendously. Our elected leaders, Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, who's taken a very good lead on this, as well as some of the residents, our pastors in the ward, in our community organization, Greater Austin Development Association. It gave me the very good sense of community that we could all come together to help the residents.
It was a very traumatic experience for all those families that were inside.
It was, and this was something that, you know, you can't necessarily plan for, and you can't plan to be displaced from your home. You leave hoping to come back, and many of them left their homes that morning, going to work, hoping to come back to their homes. And unfortunately, this incident occurred, and they were not able to do so.
Now, I want to ask, Mayor Lightfoot's budget proposal includes an increase in funding for the Chicago Police Department. As chair of public safety, what are your thoughts on this? Do you believe that additional funding is needed?
Well, I think funding is needed. I know our police budget is pretty high, but one of the things that we're dealing with, not only on our south side and west side, is increased violence. And, you know, there's always a talk of we are understaffed. And I think I'm very excited to see our police department come in next week so that we could talk about, at least from what I'm hearing, a lot of my colleagues are very concerned about the staffing shortage on our Chicago Police Department.
There's been a big effort for police to connect with people who live here.
There has been. Not just here, but throughout the Austin community on the west side. Our 15th District Commander, we've seen some really good numbers coming out of Austin. And that's because of the effort that they put in, not just in policing, but the efforts they put in to help rebuild the families from this tragic situation as well.
I want to also ask, you're currently taking community input on how to spend the $1.3 million in menu money for your ward. Based on what you've heard, where do you see this money going to?
The 1.3, we generally, we are one of 7 wards that engage in participatory budgeting, where we allow our residents to come together and vote on how to spend $1 million of that 1.3. It's been a successful program for the last 7 years, and we've seen some great projects as a result. So we're going to continue that, but at the same time, we're going to have streets repaved, alleys repaved, sidewalks fixed, lights fixed. So we look forward to another budget.
So there's a long list.
Yes, a long list of things to do.
Well, thank you so much, Alderman, for
You're
joining
more than
us
welcome.
tonight.
Thank you so much.
And stay tuned. Coming up, we speak to a local organization about the Soul Corridor. But first, I send it back to you.
A long way to go to recover for some of those folks. Joanna, thank you. Up next, checking in on efforts to clean an oil spill off the Peruvian coast. Stay with us.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
The Brookfield Zoo is more than just a place to go visit your favorite furry friends. The organization that runs the zoo has been known internationally for its conservation efforts. And recently, 2 researchers with Brookfield Zoo received prestigious awards for their work in the field. And right now, they're focusing on the impacts of oil spills on marine life. So joining us to talk about their work and the future of the planet and wildlife are Susana Cardenas Alaiza, director of the Punta San Juan program in Peru, and Randy Wells, vice president of marine mammal conservation for the Chicago Zoological Society and director of the Society's Sarasota Dolphin Research Program. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight and to Chicago. You're from Sarasota, you're from Peru. So Susana Cardenas Alaiza, I'll start with you. You're working right now to help wildlife after a major oil spill that happened recently in Peru. Tell us the damage caused by that spill.
Yeah, it hasn't been so big. It's 12,000 barrels of oil that spilled out in north of Lima in Ventanilla. There is a large population of seabirds in the area, residential seabirds, otters, and, well, of course, just the marine wildlife in the area did get impacted. There's been big efforts to clean up after this event that happened in January. But there's definitely, we're still seeing the effects. So one of the things that I was helping is not so much with the rehab and rescue of the animals, but more so with trying to get some hard evidence of the damage that had been done from the oil spill.
What is some of the hard evidence and the impacts on birds and marine life?
Well, what we did was help make a connection, build a bridge between the different government offices or authorities that working in the area, and to conduct the necropsies on the dead birds several months after the spill. So even though the slick or the oil spill wasn't evident on the water, because it had already either meteorized or sunk the bottom, some of the animals were still suffering some of the effects. So there were deceased animals that were getting picked up and then shipped out quickly to the necropsy labs at the university where I work, and they were done. Then all the necropsies and the pathology and all of these evidence of what was happening with, what was the cause of death of these animals. And there was very interesting findings linked to toxicity, even 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and 6 months after the spill.
And Randy Wells, you're experienced with this kind of work because you did a lot of research after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf. What did you discover about the damage done to marine life?
We were part of a very large team of folks from many organizations trying to understand what went on with the dolphins as a result of this oil spill. And the main aspect of our work involved comparing the health and population dynamics of dolphins near Sarasota Bay, Florida, where we've been studying them for 50 years, with those that were hit by the oil up in Barataria Bay, Louisiana. And what we have found over time is that the dolphins up there suffered severe health impacts. By comparing the differences in health between the two sites, we could point to the aspects of their health that did change. So respiratory issues, lung health issues were things that were discovered to be both acute issues and they're chronic. They're still seeing health issues affecting the lungs of these dolphins even 10 years post oil spill, as well as declines in reproductive potential of the animals and declines in the numbers of animals in the area.
What are the broader implications for marine life in the Gulf as a result of that?
Well, the implications are that it's going to take decades for the population to recover, should it be allowed to recover, and for the animals to come back to the numbers that they were at before.
And Susana Cardenas Alaiza, I just love saying your name so much. So part of the importance of the work you're doing is to sort of discover for future oil spills, for future events, how to manage them. What have you discovered about that?
Well, first, it's a big thing, and we haven't had such a large oil spill on the coast in Peru. And one of the big things is learning how to work together between not only just it's not just the government alone working, but supporting the government, the universities, the NGOs, different groups have come together to give the expertise that they have, the connections they have with other researchers to try and, move fast, have a faster response, and also, learn the lessons learned from these unfortunate, disasters is what has to prepare us to prevent the next one. So I think that's a huge lesson.
Randy Wells, is that the lessons you learned from Deepwater Horizon?
Yeah, among the more important lessons is that you need to have the baseline information in hand ahead of time. If not, you have to be doing modeling that involves using a lot of assumptions to try to understand the level of impact. But if you have the baseline information available on the numbers of animals, where they live, what their health is like before something like this happens, then you have a very precise indication of what the impacts are, and you can focus your efforts on trying to restore them much more effectively.
And you've studied bottlenose dolphins, one of the foremost experts here, for 5 decades. So I have to ask you in general, what are the things that you've discovered about them that might surprise the general public?
Probably the most important thing that we've discovered about them is that they live in neighborhoods. They're in resident populations along the coastline. They make their living, they raise their kids in the waters that are just out there where we can see them. And so what we do to the environment affects their home, and it affects our home in these same coastal waters and along the shorelines.
That's so interesting. Susana, we think of the Brookfield Zoo, we think of just that big plot of land in suburban Chicago, but clearly it has its tentacles all over the world. Sarasota for you, Randy, Peru for you. How important is it for the zoo to be involved in these kinds of efforts?
Oh, it's very important. The awareness that is being built not only in Chicago, like people in Chicago learn about different environments from around the world. They support a program. I work directing the Punta San Juan program, which is a site in South Peru. Fortunately, didn't get hit hard by this oil spill, but Chicago Zoological Society has been supporting the work of collecting baseline data, just like what Randy was mentioning.
What kind of baseline data are you collecting?
On health, on also the abundance of the animals, learning about where these animals are going out, how they use the marine environment, so where they're going out to eat and where they eat, how much they eat, how that impacts their breeding. So all of that feeds into how these populations are going to be thriving over time. So for that, when you work with, I work with pinnipeds, seabirds, and just like dolphins, you need a long time to understand this because these animals live for a long time. It's animals that are out in the wild for over 25 years. So they take a while to become reproductively mature. You need to follow individuals and populations. So we're very grateful for the support from Chicago Zoological Society that can let us do the job at the field site and understand what nature needs to survive. And
Susanna, you won an award this year for conservation from the
Yes.
Zoological Society. Randy Wells, you've won an award with the Zoological Society. So congratulations to both of you. Thank you for being here and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you for
Excellent.
caring.
Thank you.
And again, our thanks to Susana Cardenas Alaisa and Randy Wells. And now we check back in with Joanna Hernandez, who has spent the day in Austin as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
And Paris, we're now here with Malcolm Crawford. He's Executive Director of Austin African American Business Networking Association. Thank you for joining us tonight again.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I want to start asking, your association helps businesses on the ground here in Austin. What has your work looked like these past few years with COVID? I'm sure it's been up and down.
Yeah, COVID has been an interesting situation. And the businesses we've had to, as the word has been that you've heard forever, is pivot. And we've had to pivot, do it a little differently, learn how to make the changes. And so that's one thing about businesses. You have to learn to be resilient. And that's what I've seen the most in Austin is people taking what was really a serious negative and turning it into an opportunity to create business.
Are you seeing that businesses are recovering? They're in a better state, in a better position?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're starting to turn the corner. And seeing, and there has been quite a bit of federal help and state help and city help that has come in, which is rare. Usually it was more toward the social issues, but now looking at business as being part of the answer was rare, but that was part of the pivot. And so that has been really helpful in bringing business back to the community.
Now, there's also a major push to transform Chicago Avenue's business corridor into Chicago's Soul City Strip. How are those efforts going at this moment?
They're going phenomenal. Because, and I talk about that the city of Chicago is known for its cultural enclaves and those economic drivers like Greektown and Chinatown and Boys Town and Little Italy, and the list goes on in the city. But now having Soul City, that functions as that economic driver for African Americans, and just to be an inclusive place has been great. So taking a place like Chicago Avenue, I always say, what better place to have to do business on in the city of Chicago than a street called Chicago Avenue? And so it's really going well with Invest Southwest and different other initiatives coming in. It's really starting to gain traction in what's happening in Chicago.
We've been here several times, and one of the biggest concerns was that they're having a hard time opening a business because of the collateral. Do you see that people are finding different ways? There's more resources, as you mentioned, to be able to open a storefront?
Yes, there's a saying that says, if I would have known then what I know now, I could have made it in business. We're trying to address the now. And so what's helping is those of us who are working together to help these businesses, having the Chicago Business Center on Chicago Avenue, having those services where businesses can come in. And then what has also happened from the COVID and what has happened is businesses working together, which we didn't see before. But people coming in, if I have chairs that you need, or if there's other things that you need, businesses working together to help other businesses. That has been another thing that has helped out tremendously in Soul City.
And when you think about Soul City, what do you envision?
I envision a place where everybody can come and experience the sights and sound, which is the African American culture and the African culture. But when you look at that's a whole other conversation. But if you look at the diaspora and the different yams and rice and different things, they're all pretty similar. And so to bring those similarities in one place and experience that, the blues, the jazz, and all of those types of music, we're just looking for a great vision to finally take place in Chicago and on Chicago Avenue.
So there's a lot to look forward to.
There's a lot. A 1 mile strip of businesses, 21 million in streetscape that's coming, cultural identifiers along the street. So it's a lot, and we're excited.
And everybody joining in. I mean, I was here a couple months ago where there was a lot of youth also coming in to try to help.
Yep, we have youth. I mean, it's been a real collective effort. And when I say everybody, every nationality has been on Chicago Avenue helping, painting murals, doing everything. So this is really a coming together of everybody to build Soul City.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
In Brandis and Paris, I send it back to you.
All right, Joanna, clearly a lot of potential and excitement there in Austin. Before we let you go, for people who are interested in helping out from the explosion, what are some of the things they can do?
Well, they can surely come and donate down here. There is the Circle Urban Ministries. They can come and donate items there as well. They will be hosting a benefit concert on October 29th. We know there's going to be a Grammy Award performances, and all that is to help those people who've been displaced and continue to help them. And that is all that we have here from Austin. I send it back to you.
All right, nice job, Joanna. Thanks very much. And up next, a new ballet production focuses on mental health. We share a preview, but first we take a look at the weather.
A ballet company southwest of the city is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month with dancers rooted in the celebration of Hispanic culture while also bringing attention to mental health. Arts correspondent Angel Edo introduces us to Ballet 5-8.
For the last 11 years, professional dancers with Ballet 5-8 in Orland Park have utilized the practice to not only express their passion, but to tell stories to a community lacking substantial art resources.
The foot is just kind of beveled. Yeah, beautiful.
Artistic director Juliana Rubio Slager believes that commitment is important.
Out here in the suburbs, there just tends to be a lack of awareness and understanding about how important the arts are. So what I love is that we have the chance to educate and to really bring that important cornerstone of the community to a place where nobody else is kind of in that space.
They're currently using their work to educate their peers on a difference of identities with a Hispanic Heritage Month showcase.
One is called Mi Familia. I wanted to create something that would show people the real heart of Mexican immigrants. And the music is incredible. It's by Arturo Morquez. And it's this beautiful piece of music that kind of captures the highs and the lows of family life. And so the ballet is all about the joy of family. It's all about supporting one another and loving one another and living in community. So my hope is that it helps people to kind of walk a mile in somebody else's shoes.
Miranda Rubio has been dancing professionally with the company for the past 3 years. Being of Hispanic heritage and white passing, Rubio says she's utilized her positionality to ensure that her primarily white colleagues feel comfortable dancing outside of their comfort zones.
When we were staging Mi Familia initially, when I would use a Spanish term to refer to a flamenco step, they would then kind of re-say it, but in English or in another dance terminology that's similar. So we actually had a rehearsal, and Miss Juliana set aside time at the beginning of that for me to be able to speak to the whole company and teach them, okay, here's how you say golpe, here's what a planta is, here's a tacon, and like kind of speak through what flamenco is, give them a little introduction to it. You know, ballet is all in French. Very few of us are actually French. We talk in French all the time. It's perfectly okay to do a dance style that is not from your country of origin and to respectfully use the terms that are used within that style of dance.
Among these conversations of cultural awareness will also come stories addressing mental health issues.
Dia de los Vivos. So it's a play on Dia de los Muertos, but Dia de los Vivos means Day of the Living. And so this ballet actually is from my own journey with clinical depression. That's something that I've struggled with on and off for about 10 years. What you'll see in the piece is that my family is kind of there, the people who have passed on, and they're encouraging me to choose life and to keep going. And they're reminding me of the beauty of life, and that though it does get difficult, my job is to carry on because of all the people who have come before me. So that's so important for artistic directors, is to be honest about where they've been in that journey so that their dancers and then their students see that and go, oh, if I'm struggling, I can get help. Like, I want to see people decrease that stigma and really understand how vital it is that we take care of our mental health and that we strip back, I think, some of the expectation that artists are just perfect all the time.
Whether it be educating non-diverse communities, mental health, or just telling a story on the importance of family, Ballet 5/8 hopes audiences leave with a sense of understanding.
Looking past our differences and looking to what makes us the same brings us together far quicker than anything else will.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can see the full Ballet 5/8 company in their Imagine Better production this Saturday at the Athenaeum Center. Dates for the company's other fall performances are on our website. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. You can also get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7 for the Week in Review. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.